Right then, let me tell you something a bit mental. There's this bloke, yeah? Felix Dennis. Proper eccentric character. Built a publishing empire worth about 750 million quid. Started Maxim magazine, The Week, all sorts. And before he died in 2014, he wrote this absolutely brilliant book called How to Get Rich. But here's the thing that proper gets me about this book. It's not your typical think positive, manifest abundance nonsense. Felix was brutally honest. He said things like, if you're not prepared to sacrifice everything, don't bother. He admitted to spending millions on crack cocaine. He was, quite frankly, a bit unhinged. And that's exactly why this book is different. But look, I'm not going to just read you chapter summaries, am I? That's proper boring. Instead, I want to tell you a story. A story about a lad called James from Croydon, who stumbled across this book at probably the worst moment of his life, and how it completely changed everything. If you're new here, by the way, hello, lovely to have you. We break down brilliant books through stories that actually make sense. If that sounds like your cup of tea, you know where that subscribe button is. Right, let's get into it. So, James Harrington, 32 years old, works in commercial insurance at a firm in Canary Wharf. The sort of job where you wear a slightly uncomfortable suit and pretend to care about risk assessment matrices. It's a Tuesday evening, February. Proper miserable weather. That sort of grey drizzle that London does so well. James is on the Jubilee line, heading back to his flat in Bermondsey. He's been at this job for 7 years now. 7 years. And he's just been passed over for promotion, again. Now, here's the thing about James. He's done everything right, hasn't he? Got his 2-to-1 from Bristol, did his grad scheme, worked late when asked, never complained. Played the corporate game exactly as he was told to play it. And where's it got him? 42,000 a year, a rented one-bed flat that costs him 1,800 quid a month. A pension that'll kick in when he's 67, assuming the retirement age doesn't shift again. And a creeping suspicion that this might just be it. This might be his life. He gets off at Bermondsey, walks past that fancy coffee place that charges £4.50 for an oat latte, lets himself into his flat, and just sits there, in the dark, for about 20 minutes. His phone buzzes. Message from his mate Dev. Mate, you're right. Heard about the promotion thing. Fancy a pint? James doesn't reply. That weekend, James does something he hasn't done in months. He goes to see his nan. She lives in this little terraced house in Peckham, same one she's been in since 1974. Proper old-school South London. Now, his nan, Patricia, but everyone calls her Pat, she's 81, sharp as anything, and has absolutely no filter whatsoever, which is brilliant. James is sitting in her front room, drinking tea out of a mug with a faded picture of Princess Diana on it, when she just looks at him and goes, "You look bloody miserable, love. What's happened?" And James, for some reason, just tells her everything. The promotion, the flat, the feeling that he's just going through the motions, all of it. His nan listens. Then she gets up, goes to this old bookshelf in the corner, the one that's got everything from Catherine Cookson novels to old Reader's Digests, and pulls out this battered paperback. How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. Your granddad bought this, she says. Never read the bloody thing, typical of him. But I did, cover to cover. That Felix bloke, bit of a nutter, but he understood something most people don't. James takes the book, looks at the cover. Bit garish, honestly. What did he understand, Nan? She smiles. That being comfortable is the most dangerous thing you can be. So James reads the book, and almost immediately he hits this concept that Felix Dennis absolutely hammers home throughout the entire thing. Ownership. Felix writes, and I'm paraphrasing here, that if you don't own a meaningful stake in whatever you're doing, you will never get rich. Full stop. End of discussion. Doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter how hard you work. If you're exchanging time for money in a structure where someone else owns the outcome, you're fundamentally capped. Now, this hits James differently, because he starts thinking about his job, right? He's good at his job. Actually, he's proper good at it. He's built relationships with clients. He understands the industry inside out. But what does he actually own from all that effort? Nothing. If he left tomorrow, those client relationships stay with the firm. The systems he helped build, they belong to the company. The 7 years of expertise he's accumulated, it only has value as long as someone else decides to pay him for it. Felix Dennis would say James has built nothing. He's been running up the down escalator, as the book puts it. Now, James is having a coffee with his mate Dev the following week. Dev works in tech, product manager at a startup in Shoreditch. Good lad, bit obsessed with cycling, but generally sound. And James mentions this ownership concept. Dev nods. It's like equity, mate, Dev says. You know why I took a pay cut to join a startup? Because they gave me 0.3%. Sounds tiny, right? But if this thing exits at 200 million, which, look, it might not, but if it does, that's 600 grand. Pre-tax, obviously, but still. James thinks about this. So you're saying I should join a startup? Dev shakes his head. Nah, that's not the point. The point is ownership. Could be a startup. Could be your own thing. Could be buying property and renting it out. Could be building a YouTube channel. He laughs. Could be literally anything. But you've got to own a piece of something that can grow without you directly trading hours for it. James goes home that night and makes a list. What does he actually know how to do that other people might pay for? Insurance is boring, but risk assessment isn't. Understanding how to evaluate whether something is likely to go wrong, that's actually a proper skill. Businesses need that. Individuals need that. He writes down, risk consulting? Then he crosses it out. Too vague. But the seed is planted. Here's where Felix Dennis gets properly uncomfortable. He dedicates a huge chunk of the book to talking about fear. And his argument is basically this. The single biggest thing stopping people from getting rich isn't lack of ideas, isn't lack of opportunity, isn't even lack of capital. It's fear. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of what people will think, fear of losing what you've already got. Felix writes, and this quote is brilliant. The plain truth is that almost every successful entrepreneur I know was frightened at some point. Frightened to the point of paralysis, and they did it anyway. James thinks about this a lot, because here's his situation. He's got a stable job. It's not amazing, but it pays the bills. If he leaves to start something and it fails, which, statistically, it probably will, he'll have burned through his savings, potentially his reputation, definitely his peace of mind. His mum would worry. His mates would probably be supportive, but there'd be that look in their eyes, wouldn't there? That poor James, he tried, bless him, look. And what if he's just not good enough? What if he's been telling himself he's talented, but actually he's just average? The job's been hiding that. If he steps out into the open, there's nowhere to hide anymore. He's at his nan's again, talking through all this. She listens. Then she says something that properly sticks with him. When your granddad came over from Jamaica in 1961, he had £11 in his pocket. 11 quid. Didn't know anyone here except his cousin, and even that was dodgy because they'd only met once. He was terrified, James. Properly terrified. What did he do? He got on the boat anyway. She shrugs. Fear doesn't go away, love. You just decide it's not in charge. This connects to something else Felix Dennis writes about, the idea of acceptable losses. Before you take any risk, he says, you need to know exactly what you're willing to lose. Not in some vague, I'm prepared to sacrifice way, but properly specific. How much money? How much time? What's the absolute worst-case scenario, and can you live with it? James does this exercise. Worst case, he tries something for a year, it fails, he burns through 15 grand of savings, he has to get another job in insurance. Can he live with that? Actually, yeah, that's not great, but it's not catastrophic either. He's 32. He'd be 33 with a story and some experience. He'd survive. The fear doesn't disappear, but it gets smaller. Right, quick pause here. If you're finding this useful, genuinely, if this is making you think differently, consider subscribing. We put out content like this every week, breaking down books and ideas through stories that actually stick. And if you're really committed to this stuff, check out the membership in the description. We go deeper, answer questions, build an actual community around this. No pressure, but it's there if you want it. Okay, back to James. So there's this framework Felix Dennis uses that I think is absolutely brilliant. He calls it the talent, idea, execution triangle. Most people think getting rich is about having a brilliant idea. The next Facebook, the next whatever. Felix says bollocks to that. Ideas are worth almost nothing. Everyone's got ideas. The value is in execution, actually making the thing happen. And even more than that, the value is in assembling the right talent to execute it. If you're not talented at something yourself, he says, you need to find people who are and convince them to work with you. That's a skill in itself. James is turning this over in his head when something interesting happens. He's at a networking event, one of those slightly awkward things in a hotel conference room where everyone's got name badges and lukewarm wine. His company made him go, some insurance industry thing. He ends up talking to this woman called Priya. She runs a small business selling craft materials online, wool, fabric, that sort of thing. She started it during lockdown. It's been growing steadily. They get chatting about business risk, because that's what James knows. And Priya mentions that she's been thinking about expanding, but she's nervous about the financial side. Stock investment, cash flow, all that. And James, almost without thinking, says, I could help you figure that out. I do risk assessment all day. Different context, but the principles are the same. Priya looks interested. Really? What would you charge? Now, James has never charged anyone for anything outside of his job. This is new territory. But he remembers Felix Dennis saying that the first step to getting rich is getting money from someone, anyone, in exchange for value you provide directly. Honestly? Buy me dinner and let's have a proper conversation. If it's useful, we'll figure out a fee. If it's not, you've lost nothing except a meal. Priya laughs. Deal! That dinner conversation turns into a small consulting project. Priya pays him 800 quid over 2 months to help her model out her expansion decision. It's not life-changing money, but it's his money, directly connected to value he provided. He owns that. Here's where a lot of people go wrong, and Felix Dennis is very clear about this. Getting rich takes time. I know. That's not what anyone wants to hear. We live in a world of overnight success stories. Instagram entrepreneurs posing next to Lamborghinis, crypto bros who allegedly made millions in 6 months. Felix says most of that is either lies, luck, or both. For most people who genuinely build wealth, it takes years, often a decade or more. There's a long slog in the middle where nothing seems to be happening, and that's where 90% of people quit. James's little consulting thing with Priya leads to a referral, then another. He starts doing this evenings and weekends while keeping his day job. 6 months in, he's made about 4 grand from side projects, which sounds decent until you realise that's like an extra 300 quid a month after tax. His life hasn't materially changed at all. His mate Dev asks him how the entrepreneur thing is going, and James has to admit it's going slowly, very slowly. Is it even worth it? James asks. I'm knackered all the time. I'm working 60 hours a week now, and I've got basically nothing to show for it. Dev thinks about this. What did that Felix bloke say about timelines? James sighs. That it takes at least 5 years to build anything meaningful, and that most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5. So you're what, 6 months in? Yeah. Dev shrugs. Then you're barely started, mate. Come on. You're not going to quit because you haven't made £1 million in half a year. That's stupid, and you know it. There's a concept in the book called the tunnel. Felix describes this period where you're committed to a path, but there's no light visible yet. You're just moving forward in darkness, trusting that eventually you'll emerge somewhere. Most people don't survive the tunnel, Felix says. They need visible progress too frequently. James decides to survive the tunnel. We're going to fast forward a bit here, because the details of the next few years aren't that interesting. They're mostly just James doing the work, showing up, getting slightly better, making mistakes, learning from them, gradually building a reputation. But let's jump to 3 years later. James is 35 now. He quit his corporate job about 18 months ago, which was terrifying, but also sort of inevitable by that point. His side thing had grown to the point where it was becoming neglected, and he had to choose. He runs a small consultancy now, risk assessment for small and medium businesses. He's got 2 employees. Well, contractors technically, but they work with him consistently. Revenue last year was about 240 grand. His take-home after all expenses is around 90 grand. Now, let's be clear. James is not rich. Felix Dennis would probably say he's comfortably well off at best. The book has these categories from comfortable to rich to seriously rich to super rich. But here's what's different. James owns something now. The client relationships, the systems, the reputation. That's all his. If he wanted to, he could sell this business. Probably not for a fortune, but for something meaningful. It has value independent of his hours. He's building equity, not just income. And more than that, and this is the bit that's harder to quantify, he's no longer trapped. He doesn't have that feeling anymore, that, is this it? Feeling that was slowly eating him alive in his insurance job. He's got agency. He goes to see his nan, same terraced house in Peckham, same Princess Diana mug. She asks him how things are going. Good, Nan. Really good, actually. She looks at him properly, nods slowly. You look different. Not so grey. James laughs. I feel different. The Felix book worked then. Yeah, it did. He pauses. It wasn't really about getting rich, though. Not in the end. It was about not being stuck, about owning something, having options. His nan smiles. Your granddad would have liked that. He always said the worst prison is the one you can't see the bars of. Right, let's bring this together. What did Felix Dennis actually teach James, and hopefully us? First, ownership is everything. If you're trading time for money in someone else's structure, you're fundamentally limited. You need to own something, a business, assets, equity in a venture that can grow independently of your direct hours. Second, fear is normal. Every successful person Felix Dennis ever met was terrified at some point. The difference is they did the thing anyway. Define your acceptable losses, make peace with the worst case, and move forward. Third, ideas are overrated. Execution matters vastly more. And if you can't execute yourself, your job is to find and inspire people who can. Fourth, it takes longer than you think. 5 years minimum for anything meaningful. Most people quit in year 1 or 2 because they don't see results. That's exactly why most people don't get rich. Fifth, the goal isn't money, it's freedom. Felix Dennis was worth £750 million and said repeatedly that most of it didn't make him happier. What mattered was the agency, the ability to do what he wanted, when he wanted, with whom he wanted. James isn't finished, by the way. This story doesn't end here. He's still building, still learning, still in the tunnel in some ways. But he's moving forward, and he's doing it on his own terms, which really is the whole point. If this resonated with you, let me know in the comments. What's the first thing you'd do if you wanted to own something rather than just trade time for money? Genuinely curious. And if you want more content like this, subscribe. We put out videos every week that try to make big ideas actually useful. Thanks for watching. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. By the way, if you want the full experience of Felix Dennis's book, which I genuinely recommend, it's brilliantly written and properly funny in places, I'll put a link in the description. And if you enjoyed this, you might like this video here, where we broke down another brilliant book on building wealth. Click it, you'll like it, promise. Cheers.